I was gonna get an icon pass this season, but then got really into baking. I don't miss the mountain at all. I don't. Why would I? Just gotta fill that void.
Great. Welcome to the Outdoor Retailer session hosted by bluesign on chemicals, circularity, and climate. So, and how they're all interrelated. My name is Kevin Mayette. I'm with bluesign Technologies, and looking forward to having a good conversation here today. Let me share my screen, and we can jump into the presentation. So again, my name's Kevin Mayette. I'm the Director of Global Brand Services for bluesign Technologies. I am based in Portland, Oregon. Many of you who do know bluesign know that we're actually headquartered in St. Gallen, Switzerland, a global company. I represent the brand services part of the organization. So I work with the brands who are involved with bluesign. Headquartered where I am. I'm in Portland, Oregon. So that's where that is. Also, later on, we're going to be talking to Eric Siegmann, who is actually coming to us from Peru. So he will provide some great perspective from the chemical side of this conversation. But we'll let him introduce himself when he gets there. Really briefly about me, I've actually worked for bluesign now for 7 years. Like I said, I work for bluesign in the brand services group, and I help brands all over the world improve their chemical integrity. Prior to bluesign, I actually come from the brand world. I worked for REI for 27 years or so, and did a lot of things there, including working on some of the sustainability efforts there. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this here, but I thought it might be appropriate to talk a little bit about what the bluesign system is for those of you who are not that familiar with it. For those who are, I've worked for bluesign for 7 years now, and I'm still learning a lot because it is a system, and in order for it to work, it must incorporate a lot of different moving parts and pieces. But when it does work, it's incredibly effective in doing its objective. When you look at where materials are made, this is an important thing to remember, that when materials are made, you're having a whole bunch of inputs coming into the process, whether it be materials themselves, whether it's substrates, chemistry is another material, water, energy, into the textile manufacturing facility. And you think of a bulk roll of fabric coming out the other side. The challenge, however, is that there are many other things that are coming out of this facility, that being waste material, wastewater treatment, or wastewater, which can lead to sludge and a whole bunch of other things as well. And you don't always see it, but it's very much there, is air emission. So when you consider that, all the chemistry that comes into that facility, and you say, well, what percent actually shows up on that bulk roll of fabric? The fact is that only about 10% is actually on that bulk roll of fabric. 90% of it is going elsewhere. Some of it gets recycled, but not a lot. A lot of it's going up the smokestack. A lot of it is going out in the wastewater treatment. So this is really important to know and really important to think about, particularly when some of those chemicals can be quite challenging, known carcinogens, known toxins of many different types. So this is the nature in the production of manufacturing materials. And so how we manage that is really, really important. Fundamentally, when we talk about bluesign, I like this slide. I mean, I managed quality for 20-something years at REI, and we had a quality group that we refer to as quality assurance. One aspect of what we had was quality control. Quality control is really important. But quality control is a check. It's a test. It's an inspection. Quality assurance is engineering. It's how do you do things better from the beginning. When we talk about what we're doing at bluesign, and particularly when you talk about how you would address chemistry, it's really important that you have both. You have not just quality control, not just the test, but how do you engineer things better from the beginning? And so we can't test our way out of the challenges that present itself through chemistry simply by quality control. So bluesign is a system, and we have what we call system partners. And these system partners could be either a brand or a manufacturer of materials or a chemical supplier. And our relationship is direct with each of them. And what we do with them is we work with them very closely. So when we work with a chemical supplier, we go to a chemical supplier, we work with a chemical supplier, we're gathering a tremendous amount of information about how they go about doing their business. And we understand it completely. And determine, are they even competent? Are they good at making chemistry? Something we call product stewardship. How do they really manage chemicals all the way from the beginning? Irrespective of what chemicals they're making, are they good at making chemistry? And then when we answer those questions, we then say, okay, what chemistry are you making? And then we work with them to understand where some of the big challenges are, and ultimately formulate chemicals that are going to be better, or at least managing the restricted issues that we have as part of it. And only when all that comes together do you have an approved chemical or approved formulation. And right now, there are over 14,000 chemicals that are now bluesign approved. Similarly, we work with manufacturers of materials, and we assess where they are, assess their capability. Remember, a good portion of that chemistry is not going out with a bulk roll of fabric. And how do they manage it, whether it's their wastewater treatment or their air emission, or are they even competent at actually pulling this all together? And there's a lot of really good manufacturers out there, but there's a lot of practices that really need clarity and better management. And then we look at the chemicals they're using, and then make sure all of this is up to what we specify the bluesign criteria. And then only when that is all done well, both their organization and the chemistry that they're using, do we produce a bluesign or allow them to say they're producing a bluesign approved material. And then lastly, brands. We work with brands as well, and this is the work that I get to do. We assess the brands where they are in their chemical integrity programs, and we understand where their gaps are and help them understand those gaps and what it takes to close those gaps. And then ultimately work with them on their material product development. And then for some brands who have chosen to go the path, they will actually develop what we call bluesign product. So they've really taken it to the highest level of actually speccing and building a product that is that really takes chemical integrity seriously. I love this slide because this is these are the organizations I get to work with. This is a wonderful collection. I mean, I unfortunately, through time, there are 650 or so bluesign system partners in the world. This is just the brand element of it. We have equal amounts or more, actually, of manufacturing and chemical suppliers. But again, these are some of the organizations that have committed to and are working very hard at improving the chemical integrity. And exclusive today, there's a lot of energy and effort going on here. I get to announce that there's 4 more who have just joined the crowd, and I'm really excited to work with them. That being Eagle's Nest Outfitters in the great city of Asheville, North Carolina. Roughwear. A local Oregon company, fantastic producer of products for your dog. Nemo Equipment, New Hampshire. They are actually really innovative in the manufacturing space of camping equipment, and really looking forward to working with them. And then Osprey. I mean, just an iconic, absolute global recognized leader in packs. So they're all 4 of these are now joining the group, and we're working with them as well. So enough about bluesign right now. Let's move on to some other things as well. And I also want to ask a few questions as I do this here. some of you have seen me present on some things before. I want to ask this question: how many of you have not seen this diagram yet? Unfortunately, I can't see you raise your hands. But I can tell you that eventually I will stop doing presentations when nobody raises their hand for this diagram, because it's really important that we understand what our supply networks are. So this is the diagram, and some of you may have seen it, some may have not seen it, some may get, want to vomit when they see it, because they say, oh my God, is that really what it is? The reality is, this is an oversimplified view of the supply chain. And so so what we've got is a number of layers in that supply chain that all have processes that are a part of it. And what we traditionally refer to as tier 1 is where manufacturing of finished goods happens. Tier 2 is where a lot of the materials are coming together. Tier 3 is where intermediates, where raw materials become materials. And then tier 4 is where they ultimately are originally coming from. But why this diagram is actually helpful is not just the layers that show up in this space, but also the fact that chemistry as well is multi-layered. And that it's important to recognize that chemistry is not tier 5. Chemistry actually comes into the network at many different locations, whether it's at tier 1, tier 2, which is a huge place where chemistry comes in, all the way back up to tier 4, where it can be related to agriculture or extraction of resources. So that's enough of this. I have talked about this for a lot, for those of you who know me, and it's important that you get to know it well, but particularly what part of it is your supply chain. So let's move on to impacts, and particularly around the network impacts. Here's a question. Again, I can't see you raise your hand, or I can't see you respond to this here, but how many of you have calculated or are beginning to calculate your Scope 3 emissions? I know many of you might be involved in the Climate Action Corps, which is great. It's really important for this industry to be on this task. The challenge I'm going to talk to you in a few minutes here is how hard this really, really is, because of some of the challenges we face and just the way the network has evolved. So when we talk about what is our industry impact, particularly around carbon, the reality is we don't exactly know yet. There's many studies, and they're getting better. They're starting to show that they're beginning to align. That we range in anywhere from 1.2 billion to 3.3 billion tons, and that might be anywhere from 2 to almost 7% of total global emissions are related to the industry that we know. And that also depends on how you define the boundaries of that industry. And here's some of the studies that are out there. Worth taking a look at, because it's something that, how they get to these numbers is a lot of this here, which is because that's the state of what we know. Even though they may not know or completely agree on actually the amount, what is very clear, and what we do agree on, is where they come from. Where are these emissions coming from? When we go use this network diagram as a backdrop, we can see that, and this is actually from the Qantas study, that a good portion of those impacts are coming in what we refer to as tier 2. So 38%, and this is using also some generalizations. 38% is coming from within that tier 2 for energy. For water, 27% is happening there. Obviously, a good portion of that is also going to happen in the tier 4 because of agriculture. But when it comes to carbon and it comes to climate, 36% is happening there in that tier 2. This is, if you want to start someplace and really address these challenges, this clearly is the place to start or focus. So let's talk a little bit why if we break down and actually focus on that tier 2, and I'm going to go through some of this. There's a lot of text on this page here. And by the way, one of the questions people might get is, can I get this presentation? Absolutely. I will have my email up at the end. I had it up at the beginning as well. You can just feel free to email me on that. But when you look at the different types of processes that are going on in tier 2, and these are dependent upon the material. So a lot of this might be natural fibers. This might be some cottons. There are also, this is applicable in as we get to it in some of the synthetics as well. But you have what this process called desizing. As you're making materials, you need to remove some of the material that you've actually put on it in the production. And so desizing is a huge impact. A lot of effluent can come from this process as well. You can scour. You have, in natural materials, you have impurities that are part of it. And how do you get rid of that and get it ready for its ultimate production? Bleaching, preparation for dyeing, and getting that material in that space as well. Again, a lot of these are water-intensive processes. Mercerizing, so as you get it ready for dyeing as well, this is another key step. And then in synthetics, you're actually looking at doing a lot of washing because you have oils and chemicals that are a part of the production process. So this is all on the pretreatment side. On the actual dyeing and finishing side, this is where huge impacts are. Obviously, dyeing is a massive impact. You're going to be producing a product and heating that water and doing that a process of doing that. And there's a lot of effluent that comes out of that. In between dyeing and after dyeing, you have rinsing. You have printing. Printing is maybe not as water intensive, but you do need to clean a lot of the materials and the equipment they're using to do there. Washing comes oftentimes from that equipment cleaning. Finishing, not as water intensive, but definitely has it. But it has a lot of air emission appropriate for the finish that you're applying. And then coating and lamination. Not everything gets coated and laminated, but we in the outdoor industry, we don't like to get wet. So this is often applied there. All along as well, you see that we have things that do get wet in the processes, so we need to dry them. So you have a lot of energy that's necessary in the drying of these materials. So you can kind of put it together. This is this tier 2 space of, and these aren't even all the processes. These are some of the bigger ones that we want to focus upon. So why so much carbon? As I said, extreme amount of water, oftentimes very hot, up to 100 degrees Celsius. You need to heat this water, and this is necessary for the wet processing. The amount of energy necessary to heat that water, as well as production of steam, where steam is used all throughout many of these processes. These machines need energy. So in order to run the machines for dyeing, finishing, coating, you need to purchase and use energy or generate it yourself, and that is absolutely a part of your carbon footprint. The energy necessary to heat and dry things is a part of this. The predominant energy source for this space is going to be coal. And whereas we've got many that are moving to alternatives, the reality is that coal still remains as one of the most common ways to generate electricity, but also to heat the water. And so this is why we have such a high degree of carbon in the wet processing stage. And when you include fabric creation, it's up to almost half in that one space. So for those of you who've calculated or begun to calculate your scope 3 emissions, a follow-up question is anyone want to recalculate that? Because without primary data, it's really, really hard to know what those impacts are. So what are some of the most effective interventions in actually addressing these challenges, and not necessarily all of the most easiest, but some of the most effective. First of all, just fix the leaks in the system. This, oftentimes the challenge is that you're moving so fast that you're not looking at some of the low-hanging fruit. And so fixing leaks in the system, insulating pipes, insulating things that are already hot, reusing that heat is really important. And then optimizing the boilers that you already have. We're going to skip over to the third one here because this is also going to be really important in our future, is how do we actually swap out some of these coal-fired boilers, switch to renewable sources. This is going to be really important for the industry to be able to embrace. However, going back to number 2, this is the one we're going to kind of finish up on today because I'd like to really talk about things we can do right away. And that, how do you dramatically improve operational efficiency? Focus on best available techniques. There's a lot of them out there. This is something that we do as we work with organizations, is really focus on, we call BAT. It's best available techniques on how you actually do these processes. But also the best chemistry. And we're going to come back to this one here because some of the chemistry holds the key to be able to make dramatic improvements right now. So a brand must be able to know their network in order to engage with it. And in order to be able to make some of these changes, you really do need to know your network. And so here's my question. How many of you can say with confidence that you know where your materials are coming from, where they're being made? Well, as part of my job at bluesign, I get to work with suppliers. I work with brands and their supplier management. So this is kind of a bit of an informal, although I've got pretty good data on where brands are in doing this work. So I've worked with over 50 brands or more on their chemical integrity programs, and we've worked with them on their supply chains, particularly where tier 2, where most of those materials are being made. And we've analyzed those. And this spans outdoor, fashion, lifestyle, supply chains from organizations that are multi-billion-dollar companies to just a few $1 million in revenue. And some may just have a few dozen suppliers, and some have hundreds of suppliers. And some with decades of work in sustainability, and some are relatively new. So these are 2 conclusions that I can say with confidence. Number 1 is the single most important sustainability to do for you, for almost every brand, is to get to know your supply chain better. Get to know your supply network, particularly where your materials are being made. And the second conclusion is, no matter how well you think you know and manage it, it's likely not good enough. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at one challenge that we see. There's many reasons. This is one in particular, is I call supply network intermediaries. Now, these are, mind you, these are not bad things. These are actually important elements that make the supply chain work. These supply chain intermediaries could be known as a trading company or an agent, or some cases even licensees. The use of them varies widely. Some brands don't use them all. Some use them almost exclusively. In the fashion world, it's actually used quite a bit. But I have seen some in the outdoor space that have used these almost exclusively. Good agents, good trading companies are very transparent about where products are made and produced. And it's important because if you're going to work with your tier 1 and where you're doing your finished goods manufacturing from a social perspective, you really need to have that done very well. Unforthcoming ones that are not, unfortunately, create huge barriers to transparency. And so it's really important to have some good, strong relationships with them. So, some brands don't even know their bill of materials because it's produced for them completely. And you say, hey, I can put a label on that, and that's great. But the reality is you don't really know where that supply chain is. On the space of converters, interesting. I work with some brands who say, you know what, we don't use converters. And then we do the analysis, and then maybe 15, 20% of their supply chain is actually converters. A lot of times they're not even aware of it in supply chain. On average, across all the brands that we look at, is 12 to 15% in the outdoor industry of converter use. Frequently brands are, they're unaware that that may be a converter. And understandably, we could unpack this particular issue here. We won't here today, but converters can be very secretive about where they're producing products or where they're producing materials. Bad behavior on both sides, for sure, and how we actually open up and create more transparency. So the takeaways from this is, using intermediaries is not a bad strategy. In fact, in many cases, it's one of the best strategies, particularly when you're working with really good ones. However, when you have opacity in there, it creates a lot of challenges. There's probably a lot more conversion going on than you really know, and it's important to get to know that. And a best practice is to really have openness and transparency in doing that. But that's going to require you as a brand to also to be very trustworthy in how you work with them. So major processes, let's go back to these processes for a second. This is another thing that I want to illustrate, and that is where outsourcing takes place. So remember, I say, I know my tier 2. Well, here's the challenge. What do you know about your tier 2? Is this actually where some of these processes are taking place? So this is actually doing an analysis of all the organizations that are part of the bluesign system, all the manufacturers are part of the bluesign system. And again, I'm not saying this is a bad thing that they're doing this outsourcing, but unmanaged outsourcing is a challenge. So when we talk all pre-treatment in its entirety, about 13%, 13 to 14% is being outsourced. It's not happening in the place where you know as your supplier. 8.7 or 8% of finishing is actually happening in other locations. 13% of coating and lamination is happening in other locations. Printing, a huge one that's happening as an outsource, 21% is happening elsewhere. Printing, one of the most dyeing, one of the most impactful parts of the process, almost a quarter of them are happening in other places. So what are the takeaways here? Outsourcing is not a bad thing. In fact, it's often the way textiles get made. However, unmanaged, unknown outsourcing is a real challenge for transparency. And the best practice is either you manage this yourself, which is not understandably and arguably very, very difficult. I mean, it's a challenge to do that, or you work with a third party like ourselves to be able to manage all of that and make sure you've got integrity all the way through that supply chain. So this is the last thing I want to talk about before we talk about actually how do we do some things right now. Circularity. It's a good thing, right? I mean, how many times you hear someone say, we've gone circular? This is something that it's a buzzword in our industry, and it's an important thing for our industry, quite frankly. But here's the question. How many of you make marketing claims about products made from recycled materials? The example is how many PET water bottles kept out of the landfill? I mean, I see this a lot, and this is something important that we are aware of. Not just what does that mean, but in total, what does that mean? When we talk about circularity, it's important. Here's the diagram that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation popularized, called the butterfly diagram. And it's really important because we have both biological cycles on the left and technical cycles on the right. When you talk about recycling is an important one, but it's not necessarily the best one. It's not the first one we need to go to, because there are many others, from maintenance to reuse to refurbish, that are most important. And you see a lot of organizations that are really embracing circularity are driving some of these first. But when we do go to recycle, again, it's important to know what and where those impacts come from. So going back to the diagram, we see recycling. Recycling actually can happen within this diagram and actually external to it as well. There's many sources of where materials can come from, whether it's coming back from consumers themselves to many places along that supply chain where materials can be folded back into the process. But it's really important to note, where is it coming back into the process? That's way back at tier 4. And that in this space here, we've already talked about, there's a lot of impact that occurs after tier 4. And so it's really important to not just know that we're eliminating some of the impact that might come from producing a virgin material, but also it's really important to understand what's going to go on after that material re-enters the market. Many materials come in, and we've already talked about what happens at tier 2, and that's where some of the biggest impacts are. But even more importantly, when we talk about chemistry, most of the chemistry comes in at tier 2 or tier 1. And so when we have this concept of circularity, oftentimes we're leaving out the conversation of chemistry. And so how do we actually include chemistry into that is really, really an important subject. So just something to think about when you're talking about circularity is, and especially when you're talking about recycling, is that you need to have the whole picture in mind. So I'm going to pivot a bit here and talk about how do I reduce my product footprint right now? And that's where I'd like to have Eric join us. Eric, I'm going to let you do your own introduction here, but I really appreciate you being here today. You come to us from Peru, and we're excited that you can talk a bit about the market there, but also a lot of the different things that are related to. So tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Well, after all, thank you, Kevin, for the invitation and the opportunity, and hello, everybody. My name is Eric Siegmann. I live in Peru. I'm the MD of CHT Peruana, responsible for Peru and Bolivia here in Peru. I'm a textile engineer, studied in the UK, in Bolton University. I'm a specialized, or my specialization was in wet processing and in color science. And I have more than 30 years of experience working for the textile industry. And since 1993, I've been working for chemical companies attending the textile industry.
Cool.
Yes, that's it.
That's great. So tell us a little about your organization. So what's the relationship between CHT in Peru and the parent organization, where I believe you're headquartered in Germany originally, or so?
Yes. Well, CHT is an international chemical company. The headquarters is in Germany. We have production sites in all the continents around the world. And here in Peru, we also have a production site. And we are one company, and we are well aligned, whatever, with the headquarters. What we are doing. Of course, there are some flexibility. Not much, but there is a flexibility whenever it's needed for the market, for a local market. But because of the sustainability strategy that we have to fulfill and we have to follow the strict regulation that we have inside. Just for example, one name, one formula. If we have one product name, we cannot have different formulas for the same name around the world.
Great.
So if you want to buy a product from CHT in Peru, it's exactly the same product you will buy in China or in India or in Brazil.
Okay. Cool. Now, we had a great conversation a while ago where you were telling me about the textile market in Peru and that how that they're dramatically embracing the subject of sustainability, and including a bold target of really becoming known as the sustainable market in the world. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that the industry has been doing there to achieve that, and how have they been approaching understanding and embracing their footprint?
Yeah, of course. Peru has a long history in textiles. It comes from the Incas, and prior to the Incas, the old Asian cultures. Peru has been always not big in textile production, but the quality. Peru is known because of the excellent quality, the flexibility that we have. We deliver in very short times, small and big orders to the customers. But the one thing was always missing here, it was sustainability. So in the last, I would say 5 years, Peru and the textile industry started to talk about more and more, how can we position better the name Made in Peru? So today, and I'm a member of these associations, is FAIR, for example, is the Fashion Alliance to Innovate Sustainably, and Prevex, which is in FAIR, we have 17 brands, local Peruvian fashion brands, and the goal is to have 10 companies certified as sustainable in 2 years. And with Prevex we have 10 companies, full package companies, that got together and now working together to become companies we will get a certification as in sustainability. And they are starting to look all the processes to measure themselves and where they are now and where they want to be in the next years. So this has been great for all of us, because now we start to see the benefits. And today we already have one company in Peru, Textil del Valle, for example, is carbon neutral, B Corp certified.
Awesome.
They use 50% of the electricity they use is renewable with solar panels. 60% of the water treated is reused in the processes they have. So they have a very low new water consumption per kg of fabric they produce, or garment they produce. So this is happening, this is changing here. And CHT is helping them to make the processes. We as a CHT, we are helping them to make processes shorter. Whenever they want to improve the water consumption, the electricity, shorter times, everything. That's what we come and we work together.
Cool.
So this is what is happening, and it's very interesting.
That's great. That's really, really exciting and really inspiring to hear. So in general, do you believe that the chemistry for the industry has gotten better from a toxicological perspective, and maybe some examples of where that has had some pretty significant improvements in the past few years?
Yes, definitely. Yes, the chemical companies, we have been working strongly to reduce the impact that we cause in the tier 2, as you mentioned in your presentation. CHG especially, I think we have a leading position in sustainability and in circularity. We have more than almost 2,000 products already bluesign approved, more than 1,500 with a blue label, which is the best, your best available technology. And as cradle to cradle, also we have more than 100 products today with a platinum certification. So we started 9 years ago. No, in 2009, the company started to register in bluesign. We were one of the first chemical company to step in with bluesign.
So I understand there are better.
Some examples.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, you were going to ask.
Well, I was going to ask you about
just an examples of.
So we have a time delay here. So I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. Finish your thoughts, please.
No. You were asking for some examples, and I was going to say the Organ IQ process, which is eliminate completely the sodium permanganate, from the laundries, which is very toxic. Today we have an alternative. Not only is a clean alternative, but it also reduces the time, reduces the liquid ratio, is lower than 1:1.
Yeah.
You can use the Fox systems with this product, which is a very neat chemistry to use. And we are here already in Peru having success with the process. The other one is the Eco Print, which is the first pigment printing system which is fully biodegradable. And it helps when you are talking about circularity. With whatever you print on your garment, it will biodegrade in a very short time.
Yeah. So some of these chemicals you mentioned here, let's focus in on climate right now. Some of the chemicals you mentioned, you talk about impacts, or you talk about reducing. One of the things I talked about in the presentation was the fact that water needs to be heated so much, and that's where so much of the energy ultimately drives carbon. What are some of the chemistries that CHT has been has on the market right now that organizations can use that help address the challenges of how much energy and how much carbon is actually a part of this? What are some of these things here, and what are some of the impacts? What are some of give us some numbers? What kind of impacts can we see? Impact reductions.
I think is one of the processes that I've been quite happy to promote here in Peru has been the 4 success. This is our 4 aces in the poker hand. This is the pretreatment, the bleed, the dyeing, the soaping. And then you have the bleed, and you have the bleaching and the scouring together with the dyeing, and then the soap. With this process, we have a package to offer for reactive dyeing, and where we reduce the temperature of the processes in the pretreatment. If you are going to do a scouring, you can do it as low as 60 Celsius. The bleaching, you can go down to 80. And with this, you reduce the temperature, which are almost 100 or 110. You can do it and get the same result with 80 Celsius or 60. So here you have a lot of savings in energy and in time, because it takes time to get to 100 or 110 Celsius. And you need, or the company will need a lot of steam power in order to increase the temperature in a very short period of time. And the dyeing with Best Active Go is all isothermic, 60 Celsius, very nice, very robust, assuring the right first time. And the soaping, you can do it at also 60 Celsius. So you don't have to increase the temperature anymore. So the savings, depending if it's a pale shade or a dark shade, you can have in water from 20 to 30% reduction in water consumption per batch. This is for exhaustion processes. And energy, you can go really from 60 to 75% savings in energy. Wow. And time, you can shorten the process time, depending if it's a pale shade, 20%, dark shades, you can go 33, 35% shorter times. This is an average, Of course, it depends on the technology the customer is using, but in all the cases, we are able to reduce and show them savings from whatever they're doing today.
That's amazing. That's incredible. So here's my follow-up question to this, because this stuff gets me really sort of like excited and animated, because we talk about all these incredible things we can be doing. And you know what? Right now, in the supply chain, there's things you can do right now that make these huge impacts. So why doesn't everyone use these chemicals? I mean, this seems like a no-brainer. What gets in the way? This is the 64,000 whatever denomination, dollar, Swiss franc, euro question. It's like, why? And it's probably related to money. I would guess, and others.
I think so. Yes. Sometimes I will say yes. People think that it's more expensive, but when you do the numbers and you measure the whole process, you get economy. You get savings. At the end of the process, if you measure everything, okay. But if you're going to measure the cost of your kg of your chemical product or your dye stuff that you're using, and then compare it to the standard old-fashioned or chemistry they use, of course, it looks they are more expensive. Sorry. But in reality, it's not. Because the whole process ends being cheaper and faster, and another advantage with a right first time improvement, which is some customers don't even measure how much it costs to reprocess one batch.
Exactly.
And perhaps also there is a paradigm, no? If they are doing okay and it's running, people are not willing to change what is working. So, hey, don't mess with my whole process. It's too much. No?
Understood.
So let's stay like this. Just do small changes first and there. No? But luckily, I think this is changing. No? More and more, I see people more open for new ideas, and also because they have to change.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's asking them, how much did you reduce in water consumption this year compared to last year?
Yeah.
People are talking about sustainability and they're talking about what the improvement they made. So now they are more forced to change. I would like to see people actually changing because they really believe it's better for the world, for the planet.
So there's many brands who are probably listening in here today. What would be your advice to them coming from deep within the industry and seeing the opportunities that we have? And many of them are committing a ton of energy and time and effort to understanding their footprint and ultimately need to improve their footprint. How do they get involved? How do they help move this forward and use technology that's available right now? And this may be a hard question.
How can brands can help?
Yeah,
it is difficult, but I would say is we have to try to keep things a little bit more more simple. Because it's difficult. When in the chemical industry, you have to fulfill more than 250 requirements, standards in the world. So it's extremely expensive, and you cannot have one product for one standard and a different product. For me, sustainability is only one. It cannot be two or three. And we have to stick to and try to harmonize and to get a common understanding what we have to achieve as an industry, textile industry in the world. I know the outdoor industry has done a lot, and they are pioneers in this subject, and this is what I like. But the biggest challenge is the number of standards. This complicates everything. It's difficult to show transparency, when you have so many standards, and it's not sustainable because it's too expensive.
Sure. Cool. Well,
yes.
Well, I'm going to look at some of the questions, and if hopefully there's actually a few questions that might be coming in from the audience here. Let me turn off my sharing here, and we can jump into this here. Because I have more questions, but there are, and I can continue to ask you questions, or we can take some questions from the audience. So here's one actually. Can the dye stuffs cover? So when we talk about dyeing, one of the challenges obviously is that people love color, and people love to have the latest color in periwinkle or whatever you have. Can the dye stuffs that you're referring to here, can they cover the full range of colors? And so as a designer comes up with a new color, is it cover the full range, or does it limit their choices?
It's an excellent question. I think there is no range of dye stuff that can cover all the shades. Turquoise, we don't have. You will have to use a different to get the turquoise or the green shades. You will need a different shade. That I would say 80%, 70% of the shades can be done with our dye stuff in this for success technology, especially dark shades. Dark black, the navies, and where do you use more dye stuff than any other color. Yeah.
Cool. And are these chemicals? You mentioned that you have one formulation available globally. Are these chemicals? I mean, some may not be doing production in Peru or elsewhere. These are all available globally, correct?
Yes, of course, we don't produce everything in Peru, but we produce in different parts. We have production in Brazil, in Mexico, in Colombia, Peru. So, and also in India, in China, we have the production sites really. And what we do is many of the, for example, 50% of what I sell in Peru is produced here, and the other 50% is imported. So because you need a special equipment to produce those kind of chemical products, and this has been centralized in Turkey or in Germany or in China.
Yeah.
But you can get the products here. This is not a problem. In Peru and in USA, we can actually deliver the products wherever it is needed.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of some brands that have that actually have engaged with their supply chain and actually have been able to make some impacts?
I see, like, starting to get involved and starting to see what the customers are doing.
Yeah.
I don't have like an example that they have done really deep into the supply chain.
Yeah.
It's more, they are starting to collect information. Of course, you can see in the website many brands who already can show you where they produce and in each country, and where the goods are coming from.
Yep. Well, I would love to have some follow-up conversations where, and this should be a call to action to every brand that has listened in here today, that there is things that they can do right now that will, if you're calculating your carbon footprint and you know where it's happening, there is something available to you right now to be able to address that. So the question is, how do they engage? How do they, whether it's engage with you or engage with CHT or engage with their supply chain? One of the first things I said is get to know your supply chain, but how do they engage?
Well, in CHT, we take care. We have a brand and retail management team, that is willing to receive all the requirements and all the let's say questions they want to have, or if there is a problem. So we already have done very nice work with different brands, helping them to launch new products or new processes around the world for a better or cleaner process. And this can be done. Also, Mr. Ralph Katanek is the head of the textile division in CHT Germany. You can also approach him. Or if you are in Peru, I'm more than happy to help you.
Well, what I'm going to do is, as we will wrap up here, I am going to share my screen once again and pull up, there's your email address, and pull up mine as well. If someone wants to reach out, please do. And I'd love to have continued and follow-up conversations talking about how that we as an industry have really embraced some of this technology available to us today. But I want to thank you, Eric, for joining us today, taking the time to join us with at Outdoor Retailer, and hope you have a great rest of your day, and hope everyone who is a part of this session has a good rest of their Outdoor Retailer.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody. Wish you all the best, and hope to see you, pretty soon. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So this year, I thought, why not get into shipbuilding instead of getting an icon pass? I just